So, again, the exercise we're going to do has to do with flaws. So, think about the big picture. Think about what they're testing you on is the principle, right? The principles that often come up. Correlation and causation, again, it's tethered to tort law. This really is very much part of legal reasoning. The way this is good, so one is you got to understand, right, the difference between, imagine, again, you can't practice med mal if you don't understand the difference between a coincidence, a probability, or likelihood, forget probability, a likelihood, or something that causes something else, right? So this is here, and it has an extension. Going to get tested on cause and effect. So, if you characterize, now again, the word correlation, you get, I mean, there's a difference. So, a superstitious person who walks under a ladder and then slips and falls, 10 yards away, that person sees causation. Yes?
Yeah.
Now, unless you share that superstition, would you agree it's far more likely to be a coincidence?
Yeah.
Right? But if you shared the suspicion, that would not be your perspective, right? If you shared the suspicion, you would say, no, I appreciate you think it's a coincidence, but if not, because I know, right? Because I got a phone call from people that told me. Right? So, as a lawyer, again, I'm not saying you can't be superstitious and be a lawyer. I'm saying you can't be superstitious and allow it to interfere with this reasoning, right? So, I'm going to test you on this because the fact that two events occur at the same time, or that if I'm going to be here and talking about correlation, all correlation is likelihood. Would it be, again, our language, English language, has great elasticity. And if you're not aware of that, if you're not conscious of that, if I establish something is 2% more likely than 0 to bring about an outcome, have I established some kind of likelihood? Have I established some kind of likelihood? Yeah, it's a 2% is it a compelling likelihood?
No.
Well, here's the example in real life, right? You can't put a definite percentage on it, but could you say it's somewhat more likely that someone who is involved in a crime will run from a crime scene?
Yes.
Somewhat more likely, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. But are there a lot of other reasons you might run from a crime scene?
Yes.
Having nothing to do with your involvement in the crime, yes?
Yeah.
So would you agree with me if I had you as a juror and I say, well, yeah, but the defendant ran, would it be fair to say that's something you might take into consideration but not give a lot of weight to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but that's a correlation. It's just a very weak correlation. You with me?
Yeah.
So there's an elasticity. But then there are things with very, very strong correlations, very, very strong likelihoods. And that might be, a stronger one would be, sure. If we had two individuals, they both otherwise appear to be in good health, one of the individuals has smoked 3 packs of cigarettes every day for 30 years, right? And the other individual has never smoked. And I said, one of these two has lung cancer. Is there a likelihood we would go to the same person?
Yes.
Is it a certainty that that's the person who has lung cancer?
No.
But do you get the difference in this elasticity to the word correlation? It can be, it's just not a coincidence. It's something more than a coincidence, right? It may be compelling, it may not be compelling, but it's correlation. So if I want to establish in a flaw, it's that, all this is designed to come to the conclusion. So if you begin reading about facts that involve surveys, facts that involve groups, facts that involve polls, aren't you talking about groups of people?
Yes.
Right. But if your conclusion is referring to a member of that group, aren't you now speaking about causation? Talk to me, do you see it? Because that's all they're doing. They're saying, okay, here's our example of the group of smokers, right? Or non-smokers or whatever, right? Or one group of smokers, one group of non-smokers. And then they end up making a prediction, which is a causation, where it really was a correlation. And that will be on your test. It can be there as an assumption, does not be there as a flaw. When you conclude, right, that the guy who smoked the cigarettes for 30 years is the person who died of lung cancer, haven't you assumed it wasn't a correlation?
Yes.
Right? Because you're saying it's causation. So haven't you assumed it wasn't the other person who had the lung cancer?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the reason for that would be, well, because you mistook correlation for causation. Do you see it? Right? The underlying reasoning for why you would have been mistaken, right, is that you were swept away by the results of the survey, right, and then inferred from the results that, therefore, if anybody, who dies from lung cancer after that, based on those facts, would have been smoking. And that is wrong, because you went from probability to certainty, right? This is probability, and this is certainty. So if certainty is a more approachable word, well, that's what causation is, certainty. And again, in tort law, but criminal law for that matter, you're going to get tested on cause and effect. If I write, and so you read what I write, yes? And don't you see cause on the left and effect on the right? Mm-hmm. Don't you see cause as, if you were doing this by order, wouldn't you see cause as the first thing and effect as the second thing? Yes. Okay. So human nature, that human nature thing is not real helpful. So if I write, in the, so let's say I create a hypothetical and I say, in 2016 through 2019, in the Kansas City television market, right? So I've directed you to a specific place, right? Specific medium. There was a sharp rise in programs of urban violence, right? Would it be fair to say I have given you facts?
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about Kansas City, TV market, years, sharp rise in urban violence, right? On TV, right? Mm-hmm. And then I would say to you, from 2020 to 2022, so we're just looking at these 3 years, right? And then I would say to you, interestingly, from 2020 to 2022, there's been a sharp increase in urban violence in Kansas City. Yes?
Yeah.
then what is the writer inviting the reader to do with respect to cause and effect? What caused what? You're reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That in these years, there is a sharp rise in TV programmings, primetime TV programming, right? With an emphasis on show after show on glorifying urban violence, right? Then we look at the years from 2022, and statistics come back from that city which prove a sharp increase in urban violence. Now, what the writer is testing you on is this, cause and effect, right? What is the writer inviting you to infer? What caused what?
The shows caused the violence.
Yeah, do you get it?
Yeah.
And think about human nature, which is what you want to lose. I mean, you don't want to lose, you'll take it home with you, right? But in the office, it's not helpful. Because human nature is, yeah, I read that first and that happened, and you gave me years, right? So that had to happen first. Well, yeah, okay. But if the issue is to identify a flaw, do you get, that cannot be the case, right? It cannot be the case, because it's what? Flaw, right? So you have a conclusion that says, this causes this. Well, could that be true?
Could be.
Yeah. But you see, the conclusion is not going to say it could be true. The conclusion is going to state, this brought that about. You with me? That's the difference, right? The conclusion is going to be stark and unforgiving. So let's examine that and say, well, what can they do with that? In Kansas City, in the same place. Did the world, do you think Kansas City was born in 2016?
No.
Oh, so do we know anything about what happened in Kansas City in advance of 2016? No. Go figure. Well, might it have been helpful to find out? What if you found out? What if you found out, as you did your research, right, that there was, in the years preceding the TV shows, a sharp increase in the crime rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what if you asked the producers of the TV show, why did you make that change? And the producer said, well, we're responding to the sharp increase in the crime rate. They said, I mean, everybody's, you pick up the newspaper and you're reading about crime, urban crime. So if you pick up the newspaper and you read about urban crime, what might you want to see on TV at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night? How about dramas on urban crime? Man, maybe we make one party here, maybe we make it good, maybe we make the law enforcement heroes or something, but what are we putting it in the context of? Urban crime. Oh, well now wait a minute. So wouldn't it be fair to say that this caused that?
Yes.
Oh, frisky. But we initially said this caused that. Yes?
Yeah.
So didn't we, because we didn't know what we didn't know, didn't we conflate the two and we claimed this cause produced this effect, yes?
Yeah.
When the thing we claimed was the cause was in fact an effect.
Right.
Do you see it?
Yeah.
Oh. So I guess, again, I love this stuff, right? Because I think a lot of it is counterintuitive. And it becomes intuitive when you work up here. And again, you don't have to be smart. But it's like, okay. So do you get, that's one way they can test you on a flaw. But with the big picture is to go in here. Well, we didn't give you the whole. You know, half the truth is the darkest of lies. But but it is. You give somebody half the story. You give them the half you want them to have, right? Mm-hmm. Again, why do you think in much of it, certainly in analytical reasoning, they want something that's complete and accurate? Can't something be accurate and incomplete? That's the half a truth. So this was half a truth. So do you get, as you brief flaw issues, you're looking for this. This is one of the two ways, and there are only two ways I'm aware of, that they can test you on flaw issues, right? So, well, they can test you on cause and effect as a flaw issue. Now how about this? How about we don't have that. How about this? You know what happened? Because again, I'm sorry, but you don't know what you don't know. I think I say this about 23 times every day. Well, because it's the heart of it, really. Okay, so this is a fact. This is definitely a fact. TV shows emphasizing violence, urban violence in Kansas City are on the rise. Right? But do we know why?
No.
And urban crime rate, 3 years, whatever it is, a few years later, urban crime rate goes up. But do we know why?
No.
No. What we know what it's not, because the issue is identify a flaw, right? So we know it's not this. But that's what they want you to see. How about this? Could it be the case? Could it be the case? Let me see. How about in 2015, the country goes into recession. And what might a recession cause in terms of, is it likely you're going to lose jobs or gain jobs?
They're gonna.
Okay, so now I have an economy, and I'm producer of TV shows, and now there are more people out of work, right? And there are more people who have a more negative view of their future, right? So it's not 2020, it's 2007 or 2008. So for whatever reasons, I'm saying, well, you know what? People are really angry, so why don't we give them what they want to see? Why don't we give them that? So if I wanted to give them what they wanted to see, rather than showing them people who are successful, might I show them violent crime? Might this provide a motivation for whatever marketing reason I have to change my television programming?
Yeah.
Okay, and this recession you see continues. So the recession caused the TV programmers to change what they put on TV, and the recession caused the crime rate to go up because people are out of what?
Work.
Ah, go figure. So if you made these at the same time, it would be clearer. But it stands for principle, which is it possible that one factor, and you can make a depression if you wanted to make it, but is it possible there's one underlying factor that's responsible for both, there's one cause you haven't identified that's responsible for both effects.
Yes.
So that's, so they have it, they have one, they have this, they have at a pond where in the past there have been an abundance of fish and no presence of algae. Okay, so we have a pond, and over years, right, there's been abundance of fish in this pond, and there's been no appearance of algae on the surface. And I went there this year, and there were dead fish all over the place. And now there's algae all over the place. You know what I'm saying? You're not saying, look, the fish are all dead. And now I'm seeing the presence of algae, which I've never seen before. So do you see how a person could infer that the algae caused the fish's demise?
Yeah.
Do you see how it's possible to infer that the fish caused the algae's demise? Because maybe the fish's byproduct, maybe when they pooped, it gave the algae, whatever the algae needs to live. Could that be the case? Yes?
Yeah.
And could it also be the case that there was a pollutant that went into the water that killed both the algae and the fish?
Yes.
That's what you're getting tested on, and that's tort law. Do you guys see it?
Yeah.
Because all they're going to do is give you an example. So here's what I'm saying. When they present you with a flaw issue, it's like this is saying, when you have that assumption issue, lock and load on the conclusion, on the language of the conclusion, because it's very, very likely to be the answer. When you have a flaw issue, you're also locking on the conclusion. Well, basically, you're given this card that says whatever outcome they came to is wrong. So if you're reading cause and effect, right, and it's flawed, and they say A caused B, what didn't cause B?
A.
Where's Aristotle? Right? And then you got to say, okay, but I have to explain it. Yeah, you do. So it's either B caused A, which contradicts A caused B, right? Or it's C caused both A and B. And that's very likely to be on your test. And again, it's coming out of this big picture up here. It's coming out of, if you know, light from those four little categories. Okay. Just be aware, again, you're going to get tested on necessary and sufficient conditions. But if they do that, if they're going to give you a necessary condition, right, and conclude that it's a sufficient, like you guys get that now, right? When I say if they give you a necessary condition, but the conclusion is it's sufficient. It can't be sufficient because the issue is it's flawed. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. And a necessary condition is something that where if they use the word required, well, required is a synonym for the word necessary. If they use the word depends, well, depends is a synonym for the word necessary. They use the word necessary. Well, they've used the word necessary, right? So then over here, I have to give you facts, which establish something, right? But if I want to establish something that's necessary, and I'm testing you in a flaw, right? And the conclusion is, well, something therefore has happened, well, then you're saying that was sufficient. Okay. Necessary conditions become sufficient conditions, either with the use of the word only. All right. So you're reading about that tower, and you say, they say the argument is flawed because, and then you know it's flawed, right? So whatever that author came up with is simply wrong, and you're being tested to explain why. That's it. And so you're back in human nature, right? And you're reading, okay, so for this tower to work effectively, it has to be of a certain location, at a certain location, at a certain height of a certain material. It's at the location, at the height of the material. And the conclusion is, and so it's going to operate effectively. You're saying that cannot be because this argument is what?
Flawed.
Flawed. And that's the answer. I didn't say only. And then you say, what? You got to say the word only? Yeah, you got to say the word only. Those facts. Yes?
Yes.
So you're just saying, okay, One, it's predicated on, do you actually understand the difference between necessary and sufficient, which I suspect a substantial percent of test takers don't, right? But two, then you need to be able to apply. Again, there's a difference between having knowledge and applying knowledge. People can be freak bright, but they're not real good at applying it, right? We need to apply stuff. Okay, so when so if I'm here and they're testing me on this, the only other thing they can do, they can either say, I'm going to give you necessity and claim sufficiency, yes?
Right.
That's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you, but I'm leaving out stuff. Now, you don't know I'm leaving out stuff because I didn't write the stuff, right? That's what the word only takes care of, doesn't it?
Right.
When I say only, this thing goes away. So where's Aristotle? And the flip of that is, well, what if they test you for necessity and give you sufficiency? Right, and then you're shaking your head and say, what the hell does that mean, right? Well, I mean, I can understand it, so you can, right? So I know it's flawed, right? But what happens over here if instead of giving them me necessity, they give me sufficiency? So I have sufficiency. And then over here in the conclusion, they're going to claim necessity. And the principle is, again, if you're going to claim sufficiency, the easiest way to do this is with an if-then statement, right? Which I think we discussed last week, that you don't lock in just on if and then. At the very least, you don't need the word then, because you can use a comma, right? If it rains, comma, I'll get wet. Who needs the word then, right? But do you get every if-then statement represents sufficiency, but unless I'm directed otherwise, it does not represent necessity. Come on, talk to me.
Yeah.
You get it? So then you want to say, well, are there other ways they can phrase this without an if-then? Sure. Whenever it rains, I'll get wet. How is that different? What's going to happen if it rains? I'm going to get wet. What's going to happen whenever it rains? I'm going to get wet. What happens when it rains? I'm going to get wet. How about this? How about any time it rains, I'm going to get wet? What's going to happen when it rains?
Where's our stuff?
But there's some poor bastard who's not saying if then, right? Who's all tied up in that. There was no if then. Yes, because you're a schmuck. Because you're trying to make the test something it's not, right? It's not a formal logic test. Get your head out of your ass and try to be a lawyer. So I'm not saying that's the only way they can do this. It's the most frequent way for sure, right? That you have to be, because I can do it conceptually without using any of that language if I run, make it a level 4 or 5 or something, right? But you're over here, the bloody thing is flawed, you're reading the established facts, and the established facts absolutely, and every time you're on an if-then, you've established sufficiency. There are no exceptions. The way you would get around that, in other words, the way you would make it so it's not flawed, right? The way you make it not flawed on necessity, you should put the word only in there, right? Then it's not flawed, right? You're saying you only need those 3 things. Sufficiency, you make it valid by saying, now hold on, here's a tricky one. If and only if. Meaning, or how about, what about the word unless? Do you get the difference between when it rains, I'll get wet, and I will get wet only when it rains?
Yeah.
You get it?
Yeah.
One is saying, so that's a valid statement. If you're going to say, in other words, if you're establishing necessity and sufficiency together, then you got to tell me that, right? So you're going to say, I will get wet if and only if it rains. Cool. Right, then you're telling me there's only one way to do it. So that's going to be valid, so that's not going to be in a flaw issue. So the flaw issue has to go evidence of one, conclusion of the other, and that'll be the answer. That make sense?
Yeah.
Are we saying yes to the LSAT?
No.
We're saying, well, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe. Maybe yes? How about it's another area. This stuff down here. Here's your reasoning. Remember, the issue gives it away. Just to be dramatic, is it fair to say, I've told you you need to change the way you read?
Yes.
That's what this really is all about, right? And the way you change your read is, and everything starts with that issue. And the issue now creates in your mind, you're an advocate. You want to be advocates, right? You're not going to be apologists. You want to be apologists, go do something else. Right? I want to be an advocate. Right. So to be an advocate, I need something to advocate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And I'm not required. I don't have to take any case. You know, still have to have my final interview with God. I'm not going to take any case. But the case I take, I'm going to advocate and not apologize for. So they're going to test you on, well, first flaw, again, it's flawed, right? So you told me flaw. I'm going to read this 8 to 10 times on the test, right? And you're going to say what you're about to read is flawed, which means whatever the conclusion is, right, cannot follow. So as I begin to read what you give me, and again, all reasoning is, you see, that's not part of your reasoning. You get that? Because you don't know. You don't know. I remember Dave Levitt trying some, I don't know if it was manslaughter or murder, but Dave's on trial. And he's got a witness who gets on the stand and points to the wrong person as the person who committed the crime. He's literally on trial, right? And the defendant's sitting there. And Dave says to the witness, can you point to the person who committed the crime, right? And the guy points to one of the jurors. That's not a good day in court. That's a true story, right? What did Dave not know? There was another witness who then came in, but Dave did not know that at that time, right? Another witness who came in, who made the proper identification, led to a conviction. Oops. So again, I can't stress how important this whole process is. So when you're reasoning, right, you get, this is not part of your reasoning because you're not aware it exists. Right? Okay. So what they're going to test you on is common sense. Well, law is not common. So your nature is going to tell you that when you defeat somebody's reasoning, right, this is the reason, yes?
Yeah.
You're going to also defeat what? Their conclusion. So when Edward tells me each year that the Mets are going to win the World Series, do you get 1963, it really would have been easy to pull his reasoning apart.
Yeah.
Right, because what's he going to tell me? Well, they were 42 and 120 the year before. I'm not thinking that's really compelling. You know, they had 4 20-game losers on their pitching staff. I'm not sure about that. But, you know, but you get, if I said, but I've defeated all of your reasoning, okay, then what have I defeated?
No, that's the flaw.
Yeah, that's the point,
That's
yeah.
what I meant.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. When you defeat somebody's reasoning, you defeat their reasoning, right? Again, come with me to an indictment, the defendant, the defendant, the defendant, the defendant, right? When you defeat somebody's reasoning, what have you defeated? Their reasoning, no, well, it depends what the word argument means,
Oh, yeah, reasoning.
right? But the word argument would include the conclusion,
Right.
which you've not defeated their argument, you've defeated their
Reason.
reasoning. We're really about specificity, right? So I would have defeated Edwards' reasoning in the 1968-1969 baseball season. But I would not have defeated his conclusion because I believe it was 69, right, when the Mets won the World Series.
Right.
Right. So you're tested on this. And so a flaw, and again, remember, you're reading a flaw. So they're screaming at you, right? Just can't be. And then you say, well, wait a minute, you're going to give me established facts. You're going to give me the conclusion. I just need to be able to separate one from the other. But once I do that, okay. So if you're giving me stuff over here about defeating reasoning, right? And then you say to me over here, you've defeated the conclusion, what do you think the answer is going to be? It's going to be that, right? If you fail to respond, look, the central premise is this has to be addressed. If you want to prevail, if you want to say you prevailed in an argument, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to address the reasoning and prevail on the reasoning. That doesn't mean you prevailed on excluding the conclusion, but you need to address this to have any claim of success, right? So, if you fail to address the reasoning, you can't defeat the reasoning. And they'll do that. Again, you'll have flaw, right? And over here, now you're reading these facts that are established. You're not even going to have to infer it because they're giving you all the facts. There is no fact to infer, right? You're saying they give you these facts. And so maybe the facts are, we should, maybe it's an argument. And you say, we should build a bicycle path along the roadbed of the Long Island Railroad. Right? And maybe you give some reason to that, right? And then the response to it is, no, we should build a bicycle path along the Long Island Expressway. Or, no, it makes more sense to build it along the Long Island Expressway. Do you get there's a failure to address the reasoning here, the claim here that we should build it alongside of the Long Island Railroad? Talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
You have to address the reasoning, and they get multiple ways of attacking that. You're almost certainly going to see on here, which I think will be a level 1 or a level 2. Do you get it? Doesn't matter who writes the reasoning. If Donald Trump writes the reasoning, are you now obligated in you're not obligated sitting there now, are you now obligated in my profession to read that reasoning as you would read any other reasoning, whether you like Donald Trump or not?
Yes.
If Barack Obama writes the reasoning, you're going to read Barack Obama's reasoning the exact same fucking way you're going to read Donald Trump's reasoning. Talk to me.
Yes.
And if you can't, get over it and do something else for a living. Right? Because again, then your heart is interfering with your head. Right? So if you're going to bait and switch, you want to sell me socks, but I went in there to buy shoes. I wanted to buy shoes, right? And you said to me, no, you should buy socks. Well, what does that got to do with my shoes? Okay. So the failure to address reasoning is a flaw. You must address the reasoning, and likely that will be on the test. Again, here, also on the test, is going to be that message that a person gives you reasoning and has an interest in the outcome does not mean you get to reject the conclusion, right?
Right.
I mean, well, again, it's likely going to be on your test. It's likely going to be a level 1 or a 2. It's like, so why do I care that the mayor's family is going to benefit from the redevelopment of Times Square? Don't I really care whether or not the redevelopment program makes sense?
Yes.
Talk to me. But do you see how, to me, like, so much of this is, can you get over just being a blockhead? Right? Can you just like get over it? But I don't want to hear that. Well, then do something else for a living. Because when you don't want to hear, this category quadruples, and your effectiveness diminishes accordingly. So you want to be aware of message and messenger, right? I have spent some time in the courtroom. It's not unlikely that one juror, some godforsaken juror, heard something I said and gave it greater weight because I said it. Right? Because I'd have my big black bag, I'd have my badge, I'd have the imprimatur of the people. You get it? So, but what if a juror or series of jurors said, well, it really wasn't much of a case. Really, I mean, if somebody else had sold me that bill of goods, I would have left it on the curb. But he has that badge, and I don't think he was supposed to show that badge, but I saw that badge. And he keeps saying the people, like he's the people. I mean, so maybe we don't care so much about this, so I think we'll convict anyway. Do you agree with me that would be horrible?
Yeah.
Okay, but this is human nature. Human nature is, we do gravitate with greater interest and greater trust for some people than for others. Right? Actually, at the end of this, I remember saying to jurors, there used to be a time when I would, in my opening, say, we're going to have a police officer come in, the police officer's going to be in uniform, you may not give that officer's testimony any greater weight or credibility than anybody else's. That was the beginning. I said, by the end of it, I was saying, so we are going to have a police officer come in uniform. You are not to dismiss that officer's testimony or give it lesser weight. Just because they're police officers. That's the span of like 11 years, and this is changing. Okay, so you're going to be tested on these, well, I think really basic things, as well as, I think this is more involved, right? I don't think it's involved to say, I don't care. It's not that you don't care who's speaking. You would take it into account, right? But you don't make a decision based on that. You get over that and say, well, just give me your reasoning, and I'm going to pretend I don't know who you are. Maybe we'll do that. Someday I'll just commit, maybe I'll do that. I'll have you give me your favorite Supreme Court justices and your least favorite, the ones you love and the ones you hate, right? And then I'll bring in opinions, but I'm not going to attribute the opinions. I'll bring in pieces of the opinion, right? And I assure you, I will have you read an opinion with somebody who, if you know they wrote that opinion, you say it's wrong, right? But if you don't know who wrote the opinion, you're going to say, that was really well reasoned. Do you get that really is what much of this is about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, Ross. I mean, it's liberating because you're just so much less of a jerk.
Peter, stupid question. So one of the flaws going backwards is that the conclusion can be right, it could be correct even if the reasoning is
Absolutely.
Can it be the other way around or no? Or they don't test it that way?
What are you saying? So are you saying that the conclusion can be correct, but the reasoning be incorrect?
The other way around. Can the reasoning be correct, but the conclusion be wrong?
Well, if the reasoning is inferentially correct, but the conclusion is claimed, in other words, if the reasoning here is something you are inferring the conclusion, right? But inferring always means you may be wrong. Yeah, because you could have a conclusion that says it must be, but your reasoning was fine, but still that conclusion would be wrong. So for a conclusion to not follow the reasoning would require, I have to think about it. I don't think it can be. I think if the reasoning, because if it's inferential, you're saying it follows, but it may be wrong, right? So if this is by inference, my claim is not that the conclusion is correct. So my claim encompasses sort of a safe harbor, right? The safe harbor is the 2% chance I'm wrong, or the 4% chance I'm wrong. If you're coming in here with a deductive conclusion, then then the only thing you can do here is, then this must lead to that. There is one issue in logical reasoning which says which of the following is most strongly supported by the information above, or what could be most properly inferred, right? And there, you can have reasoning that is correct, but it will not be the conclusion, because it works that your reasoning is incomplete. In other words, you may have reasoning that establishes this, and establishing this establishes this, and establishing this establishes this, and establishing that establishes that, right? So a conclusion that this establishes this is correct. But no, let me change that. The reasoning, right, that establishes this conclusion is correct, but it's incomplete. So it's accurate, but it's not complete because there was another step that was there that could have been taken. But I think your other point that it's not tested, or I'm not aware that it's tested in that way. Last one here, and there are more than this, but I think we discussed this. So just using sets versus members, whole and parts you can use, I mean, the words are interchangeable. You are tested on this. And again, it's the issue. Once you've read that, it's flawed. So I'm going to open this up. They're going to telescope to me it's flawed by using the word flaw, error, questionable, or vulnerable, no exceptions. You're going to then accompany that with the word argument or reasoning. So I got the issue. Issue identification is closed. That now sets the psychometric of this, the nature of this is, okay. So you now want me to explain why this is wrong, not to apologize why it might be right. Right? I'm not a social worker, I'm a lawyer. Right? So this has to do with, which I'm pretty sure we discussed. But just because, and I think the example they had from the prior exam, when you say set and member of set, or whole and parts that make up that whole, however you want to see it, right? But if every part of a paragraph is a sentence, and if every sentence in the paragraph is short, does it follow from that the paragraph is short?
No.
You see, no, it doesn't. You guys get it. But again, you read the issue. The issue is this. What I'm about to tell you is flawed, right? And then you're reading over here, right? And you say, well, wait a minute. This person is referring to something within something else, right? So sentences within a paragraph. Songs or art within a collection. Players on a team. Would it be fair to say that players on a team is analogous to paintings in a collection?
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah.
And that's analogous to any number of things, right? So the principle is simply because a member, each and every part shares the same characteristic, right? Could it be the case if each and every part of something shared the same characteristic? Could it be the case that the whole has that characteristic? Could that be the case?
It could be.
Of course it could be, but is it fair to say that would never appear as a flaw issue?
Could be.
But it could never appear as a flaw issue, right?
Right.
Because it wouldn't be flawed,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yes.
Right? You get it, talk to me.
Yeah.
So they can only present this to you when it doesn't work, which is not to say it never works. Of course it works. If you tell me that each and every word in a book is English, and you tell me so the book is an English book, I don't see the flaw in that if every word is in English, right? So, but you're not going to test me on that, right? Because you test me on flaws. So, but if you say to me, each and every ball player on the team is the best at his or her position, yes?
Yeah.
And therefore, my conclusion is that team is the best team. Didn't you? I mean, you told me it was flawed, right? So where's Aristotle? Didn't you just direct me to members of something and then to the thing they belong to? Right? Am I missing something here? So do you get, it could be presented to you as valid, but that would exclude it from being flawed, yes?
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. Now it works in reverse. It works in reverse. So I'm taking it from, okay, if the members have a certain attribute, right, then don't assume that the group to which they belong shares that attribute, and it works in reverse. What if the group has an attribute, right? So would it be fair to say if over here, now if they're going to test you that way, right, it can't work, it's flawed, right? So if they're going to test you that way, and you're reading over here, the facts established, and you start reading about the city council. City council. That sound like a group or a member? A group, talk to me. Right, but you, so you know you're reading something flawed, right? And you're now in the established facts, and you're reading about the city council. If the city council's vote on something is unanimous, do you know how every member voted?
Yes.
Yeah. You know.
And so why will that never be in a flaw issue?
Because it's not a flaw.
Yeah, not flawed, right? So when a city council votes and you're not told, all you're told is the city council votes, yes?
Right.
So if the city council votes for an increase in taxes 7 years in a row, does that mean that Charlie, who's a member of the city council for the past 7 years, is not going to be reelected because he supports an increase in taxes? No. Does anybody know how Charlie voted? I don't know how he voted. Do you see it? So when they go this way, you're reading about the group the thing belongs to. So over here, you may be reading medical compounds. Does compound suggest there's something else that's less than a compound? If you're reading over here about medical compounds, right? Medical compounds treating heart disease have been proven to be effective. Yes?
Right.
But now they have to take you someplace. And then they say, and they give you some term, you know, I don't know, ethyl alcohol. They give you some term, right? That you never saw before. And they say, ethyl alcohol is a part of every one of those compounds. And so ethyl alcohol must be a good thing. Does that follow?
No.
No. Because the only reason there is it could be good, right? But it may be the reason it's good is because it's in the presence of a combination of other elements, which working together is helpful, but standing alone would not at all be helpful. But you get the principle. The principle is, here, they're either going to take you from the set and say, therefore every member of the set shares the attribute, and it's got to be invalid, right? Or they're going to give you a member of the set and say the set as a whole shares the attribute. And it wouldn't be given to you if it were valid, and if it is valid, it ain't the answer, because that's not flawed. Yes? Well, that's pretty much where I wanted, because the purpose here is to lay the groundwork for the exercise, right? That as we do this exercise on flaws, I want you looking for this, and it becomes a recognition test. You get that?
Yes.
That, again, when I'm down at this event Friday at Baruch, and we were going over the analytical reasoning, right? The answer was A. Somebody raised their hand and said, well, shouldn't I look at B, C, D, and E? And I'm saying, no. And I said, so explain to me, why would you look at B, C, D, and E? And she says to me, well, I want to double check my work. And I said, well, that's great in college, right? But not on the LSAT. Do you get what you're doing here? If you take command of these concepts, right? And the writer gives you an example of the concept you have command of, and you recognize the answer choice as an example of the concept that you have command of. You talk to me, come on, right? And you don't pull the trigger. What am I missing? What are you going to run out of?
Time.
But if you do it before you're prepared, then you're going to get your ass kicked.
Right.
Right? If you're prepared, but what is the value of preparation without execution? Right? And that's what that young lady was saying to me at Baruch on Friday, is she's not making the distinction of when you're taking the test, you're not in the preparation phase, you're in the execution phase, and psychologically that's an entirely different place to be. But you can't get to execution without what?
Preparation.
Right? And then it's psychometric, saying, okay, now I gotta act on it. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have a sense for what I'd like to achieve on the full exercise that we'll do. Yes? Talk to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me. That's not really, you don't really not to me, can you start act like Pace? Okay, so we're going to make that transition now. Michael has arrived, so Michael's going to come down and speak with you. I'm going to wither away into the background, and then we will get to work with that. Michael?
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Good.